Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So today, if you look at the Delhi edition of the Hindu, we have a number of important topics. I have chosen 15 articles so that we can comprehensively cover the newspaper and you don't have to go back and read the paper again. But before we start, I have a very important announcement. If you're preparing for the upcoming prelims exam and even 2027 aspirants who are looking to practice as many prelims mock tests as possible, you have a great opportunity to enroll to our All India Prelims mock test. Now, this would give you access to around 30 mock tests, including 8 sectional tests, 11 full length tests of GS paper, and 11 full length tests of the CSAT paper as well. Now, this product is priced at 4,999. But for 4 days, we are making it available at just 1 rupee so that all the students can take the benefit of this test series. You will also get an All India rank and you can compare your performance and you will essentially get a feedback on your preparation as well. So, this offer will end by 4th of May. So, please enroll within that period and the link is provided in the description box below. With this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 6, the Hindu carries an editorial that focuses on health insurance in India. This article gives us a great insight into public health insurance and how health access has improved for the poor population in the country and what gaps remain when it comes to implementation of public health insurance. So, this article is based on the data of the Household Social Consumption Survey that was carried out by the National Statistical Office. The NSO carries out a periodic household social consumption health survey that determines the household level healthcare expenditure as to how much a family is spending on healthcare. So, this is a key socio-economic indicator. So, based on this data, the success of Ayushman Bharat, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, is very evident. This flagship program, launched in 2018 by the Modi government, has definitely helped in better penetration of public health insurance. But when it comes to implementation of the scheme, there are certain gaps and shortcomings which are being noted in this editorial. So let's go beyond the article and let's understand this topic in complete detail. See, before the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana was introduced, the health insurance coverage in India was extremely low. If you look at the data for Household Social Consumption Health Survey reports of 78th and 79th report and compare it with data from the 80th edition of this report, you will see a remarkable difference. You will see a 3-time increase in insurance coverage in the country. Because generally in India, it has been noted that people do not have the culture of risk aversion. One of the ways to avert risk is to get yourself insured. So, even amongst the middle classes, there has always been a general hesitation to get health insurance done. And this exposes the poor families, even the middle class families, to catastrophic healthcare costs, which could push many of these families into poverty. Some of the families might be quite well off, but when they are faced with a catastrophic health risk, especially chronic health conditions, non communicable diseases, which could lead to terminal health condition, in such scenarios, the healthcare cost will shoot up to such an extent, especially in tertiary healthcare, that families won't be able to bear the burden. And as they bear those high costs and expenses, they'll even end up borrowing debt, and the family itself could get pushed into poverty. That's what we call as catastrophic healthcare cost, where a family's financial status could get destroyed and they might get pushed into poverty. So, this is where insurance coverage plays a critical role as a risk aversion factor. Now, when you look at the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana under Ayushman Bharat, it was launched in 2018 to provide universal health coverage covering at least 12 crore families in India. It's a centrally sponsored scheme with the funding shared partly between the center and the state. And it is implemented to provide for at least 5 lakhs of insurance coverage per family to ensure that their primary, secondary healthcare costs and even some of the tertiary healthcare costs is taken care of. The main focus is to reduce out of pocket expenditure and protect the financial stability of families, of poor and middle class families in particular. Now, under the scheme, there is no limit on the number of members in a family household, which is one of the good features. And also, it covers pre hospitalization, post hospitalization. It also provides for immediate coverage of all pre existing conditions. In fact, when you look at the private insurance in the market, majority of the schemes don't have such wide coverage and provisions. So that's why a government run insurance scheme of this scale could actually be a game changer to provide universal health coverage and ensure that the financial implications for families are covered at least to some extent. So, in this regard, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana has done pretty well to protect the poor and vulnerable groups, as the coverage has increased by 3 times, as I told you. But however, when you look at its overall implementation at the grassroots level, there are many shortcomings that are clearly visible. For example, when you look at how the cost is reimbursed, this is usually at below market prices. Now, when you go in for hospitalization, let's say for a complex surgery, there are a lot of consumables and diagnostic tests which are involved, which may not be entirely covered by the insurance. Now, under Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, the rates prescribed by the government are way below the market rates. So, what private hospitals do, they will either reject the patients since they know that they may not get reimbursed at market cost. They'll not accept the beneficiaries of the scheme. They will deny hospitalization itself. This is one of the weaknesses. Or they will exclude some of the prices, some of the diagnostic tests and consumables. They will charge them at market prices because they know that under the insurance scheme, the government is not going to reimburse the full amount. So, this is one of the critical gaps where either private hospitals deny hospitalization to the patients because there have been substantial delays as well in providing the reimbursement. In the release of the funds, a lot of delays have been seen, which also leads to that hesitancy being built up in the private healthcare sector, where the hospitals might deny people with the Ayushman Bharat cards and they'll not essentially extend healthcare to them. So the other concern here is that they might separately bill, separately charge for diagnostics and consumables, which will again increase the cost on the patients. So this is one deficiency in the last mile delivery that is still present. And also, the insurance program provides good coverage for primary healthcare consultation, particularly for outpatient services. It also has a decent coverage in secondary healthcare setups where relatively less complex health procedures are carried out. But when it comes to tertiary healthcare, where complex surgeries, complex procedures have to be carried out, here the coverage remains very, very poor. Though the scheme was designed to primarily target secondary and tertiary healthcare, it has largely benefited patients who are seeking outpatient services, basic primary consultation at the primary healthcare level, or simple procedures and hospitalization under secondary healthcare. So, this still exposes many families in India to catastrophic healthcare costs. But one positive feature of the scheme is that recently the government of India has extended unlimited coverage to all senior citizens above 70 years, irrespective of their economic status. Not just for senior citizens from poor families. all senior citizens in the country above the age of 70 years, they are all comprehensively covered up to the insurance limit under Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So this provides for insurance support for geriatric healthcare as well. So while there are many such positive provisions, there are these weaknesses, gaps, and shortcomings in implementation which needs to be plugged immediately. Because studies have shown that out of pocket expenditure, or OOPE, the median out of pocket expenditure, though it has reduced, the mean level out of pocket expenditure continues to increase in the country. On average, per hospitalization, the cost is coming down to around 11,000 rupees. And this is a very large sum for poor families. And if they are looking at multiple hospitalizations in a year because of existing health conditions and poor health in general, this cost increases significantly at the family level. And this is something which can even push a middle class family back into poverty. So, repeated health circumstances within a family can have catastrophic impact on the financial status of even middle class families. So, that is why the editorial is urging the government to ensure that this insurance scheme is truly provided with universal coverage. Ensure that it focuses on tertiary healthcare. And more importantly, the government should plug the gap by strengthening public healthcare in the tertiary sector. Right now, when you look at primary healthcare centers under the public healthcare system, they have a very good reach at the grassroots level. Even with regard to secondary healthcare facilities, district level hospitals, they have a very good coverage and decent availability of infrastructure and resources. But when it comes to tertiary healthcare, where chronic conditions, terminal life threatening conditions have to be dealt with, complex surgeries have to be carried out, the number of public healthcare facilities are still very, very limited. And this essentially limits the access to affordable and quality healthcare in the country. So that is why the government should not only widen the coverage of Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana scheme, but also strengthen public healthcare institutions at the tertiary level to ensure that high quality healthcare is made easily accessible for the poor people as well. So these are some recommendations that we can take away from this editorial. And based on that, please take up this mains practice question. Under GS paper 2, you can definitely expect questions on public health and insurance. And since it is also related to a flagship government scheme, the topic can be very, very important. So please use this question to practice your answer writing based on what we have discussed. Now let's move to another interesting article. On page 7, there's an article that focuses on the safe harbor provisions under the Information Technology Act of 2000. The entire article is dedicated to how the government has been blocking social media accounts. It brings up the debate between the fundamental right to free speech and expression under Article 19 and the reasonable restrictions placed under it. On what grounds free speech and expression can be curbed? And what are the provisions of the Information Technology Act that essentially deals with taking down of online accounts or blocking any harmful illegal content on digital and social media platforms? Now, in the recent months, you might have heard that be it at the central government level or at the state government level, a number of requests have been flooding social media companies like Meta, X, and others. Repeatedly, the authorities, could be the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, or it could even be the local police, repeated requests are coming in on a daily basis to take down several posts or block several accounts. And this has raised concerns about an assault on free speech and expression. Is the government targeting even genuine criticism and opposition? Because there are many, many instances. For example, a post which was um, critical of the government policies, they have been blocked on the grounds of either national security or disturbance to public order. There have been instances in states as well, in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, where some posts which were essentially making fun of politicians, right, or which was relying on comedy to expose the gaps in our governance, any such satirical posts are getting taken down and blocked. Recently, a viral video on social media, which was aimed at the prime minister, was also taken down, and the creator's account was also blocked. And the social media firms, be it Meta owned Instagram, Facebook, or X and other platforms, they are more than willing to comply with government orders, because right now they are under very strict scrutiny. The regulatory framework has become very, very strong under the Information Technology Act. They might risk losing the safe harbor provision. So let's explore this topic slightly in detail. What do you mean by the safe harbor provision? What's the process through which the government can issue these orders? And what legal power does the government have to take down any harmful illegal content? See, there is no doubt that fake news and misinformation poses one of the biggest threats on digital platforms. This could also turn into real world security threats. Fake news, propaganda, misinformation, and disinformation can even be used to instigate riots or to create disaffection against the government, to threaten India's national security. And in today's world of AI, with the emergence of deep fakes, it has become all the more easy to create hyper realistic content, and that can be misused with a malicious intention. So, definitely, the government has a duty as well, a responsibility to protect the citizens, to protect national security by tackling the menace of fake news, misinformation, and deep fakes. But somewhere that fine balance has to be struck, because any excessive use of these laws by the government could result in violation of fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 19. So it is this debate or controversy that we are going to discuss under this topic. Now, when you look at Information Technology Act 2000, we have Section 79 that deals with the safe harbor protection, which is provided to social media firms, tech companies, and other IT entities in the country. This was introduced in order to create a safe and flexible environment to help the tech industry and IT companies and social media firms to flourish in the country. So, under the safe harbor concept, it is essentially held that the intermediaries, who are none other than the social media companies, the tech platforms, they are not legally liable for the content which is posted on their platforms, meaning they have been given a certain degree of legal immunity. Even if illegal content, harmful content is posted on their platforms by some random user, these are third party users, right? You can't hold the company directly liable or responsible and accountable, meaning you can't file criminal charges against the company officials. You can't go and arrest the company executives because some user had posted illegal, harmful content on the platform. This is the general legal landscape that you see even across the world, where intermediaries like Meta, Google, X, and others, they are given legal immunity. They're not directly liable for the content hosted on their platform. But however, this safe harbor is conditional. This is not absolute immunity. Please remember that. This immunity given to intermediaries, it is not absolute. It can be withdrawn by the government under specific conditions. The condition is that these intermediaries, they have to cooperate with the law enforcement. If the authorities are flagging any harmful, illegal content, and if the requisite orders are issued by following the due process, these companies are mandated by law. Under the IT Act, we have these IT rules which mandates the intermediaries to ensure that such content is taken down within a prescribed deadline. Previously, the deadline would be around few days, depending on the severity of the post. But recently, earlier this year in February, the government has amended the IT rules of 2021 and it has reduced the deadline to just around 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours. So companies have to be on their toes, they have to act in real time. The moment they receive any lawful orders from the designated authorities, they have to take down such content and cooperate with the authorities to investigate those accounts. And if they don't do it, if they fail to abide by these regulations, they will stand to lose the safe harbor protection. This immunity, which was granted to them, can be withdrawn by the government, meaning the company can now face criminal liability. The government can press criminal charges against the company executives. So, while such accountability is necessary, and this power also is required to the government to deal with harmful content, the problem is if there aren't enough checks and balances, it can easily be misused by the ruling parties in power. They can misuse the same law, the same provisions to target anything that's critical of the government, anything that's making fun of government leaders, or any post or any article, any video which could be seen as criticism of the establishment. Now, this is where the fear effect kicks in, what's called as the doctrine of chilling effect. When you see that your fellow journalists, activists, their accounts are being blocked, charges are being pressed against them for their social media posts, the other users will automatically silence themselves. Journalists and activists, or even common citizens for that matter, who might be politically vocal, right, exercising their fundamental right to free speech and expression, when they see that others are being targeted for what they are being posting on social media, they might end up silencing themselves, which is what we call as the doctrine of chilling effect. And that is the concern which is being flagged by experts as well. There are many, many instances, documented instances, which are coming up where it appears that the government, be it at the central level or at the state level, is acting with a political mindset. Even content which is not per se against India's security, content which may not be harmful to our sovereignty, content which may not be really threatening public order in any way, such content which is just criticizing government leaders and government policies are also being taken down and entire accounts are also being blocked. So, what provision gives this authority to the government? See, first of all, under IT Act, there have been some controversial provisions. For example, we had a provision called Section 66A. This allowed the authorities to take down any offensive or menacing messages circulated or posted through communication networks, through computer devices. And this particular provision was extensively misused by the law enforcement and police authorities across the country. Again, both at the central level and at the state level. Because, see, what is offensive to you may not be offensive to me. It's very subjective. The provision doesn't provide that specificity as to what constitutes offensive. It gave the discretion to the authorities, to the police to interpret as to whether a message is offensive or not. So, any post, any message which was critical of government leaders or government policies would be branded as offensive or menacing under this draconian provision, Section 66A. And many innocent people that got jailed under this stringent provision of the IT Act. But in 2015, the Supreme Court of India delivered a landmark verdict in the Shreya Singhal judgment. In the Shreya Singhal case, the Supreme Court declared Section 66A to be unconstitutional, to be violative of the fundamental right of free speech and expression under Article 19. And this provision was struck down by the Supreme Court. But what's ironic is that even after Section 66A was struck down by the courts, the provision continued to be used by local police across many states for several years. Now, the practice might have stopped, but this again shows the gaps in the legal and the governance systems. Though it was struck down in 2015 itself, for at least 2 3 years more, in some cases, police continued to book people on charges of Section 66A, though it was no longer in the law books. Now, in the same Shreya Singhal case, the Supreme Court dealt with another provision of IT Act, that is Section 69A, which is currently being used by law enforcement authorities to deal with harmful, objectionable, and illegal content. This is the provision which is now being employed, Section 69A. It authorizes the authorities to take down any harmful digital content if it is threatening the sovereignty of the nation, the security of the nation, foreign relations of the country, or public order, if it can lead to incitement to an offense, right, or cognizable offenses. On these grounds, which basically corresponds to the reasonable restrictions under Article 19, on these grounds, online content can be blocked and taken down by using the powers of Section 69A. But however, in the Shreya Singhal judgment, the Supreme Court had said that this can be done only if there is knowledgeable information. Only if there is knowledgeable information being provided by the government to the intermediaries, to the social media firms. Meaning there has to be a legal valid order issued by the concerned authorities. Only then Section 69A could be invoked. See, in 2021, the government of India brought in the new set of IT rules, the IT Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code. And this has been amended several times in the last 5 years. In fact, every few months, the IT rules have been amended and it has been made more and more stringent. For example, under the IT rules, the major social media intermediaries, which have very large subscriber base, they are mandated to have residing officers who are posted in India. For example, there must be a compliance officer, right, who will work out of an office registered in India, and they should report their details on their websites as well, so that that person can be the point of contact for the government authorities. There has to be a grievance redressal officer. There has to be internal systems within these tech companies and social media firms so that the government can hold them accountable. Previously, many of these firms based outside of India, they would claim legal immunity and they would say they are not accountable under Indian jurisdiction, under Indian laws. So with the IT rules, this framework has completely changed. And now all the social media firms and tech companies operating in India, they have to abide by these regulations. Meaning they have to have a registered office in India. They need to have these local officials, right, posted in India. There has to be a compliance officer, grievance redressal officer, a point of contact. And these officials can be held accountable if the company breaches the rules and regulations. Meaning the safe harbor can be withdrawn by the government and the company officials can be booked on criminal charges and arrested as well. So this has created a fear mindset amongst social media firms. And the tech companies are also complaining that if government keeps amending the rules every few months, how can they keep updating them? Because see, the world of social media works in real time and they're dealing with massive subscriber bases with millions of posts coming in on a daily basis. So adapting to the changing regulatory framework where there is no consistency will become a challenge. It will become a compliance burden for the tech companies as well, which is a genuine concern. You need to provide regulatory stability that once rules are notified, at least for a year or two, there should not be any changes. But IT rules, as I said, have been amended multiple times, creating a compliance burden on the companies. And second, the deadlines have been reduced drastically. In 2021, some of the deadlines to take down the posts was in the range of 24 to 36 to 48 hours. Now it has been reduced to just 2 to 3 hours this year, which means now companies are acting on their own. Even before, companies used to act on their own, but now there is a greater urgency on the part of the company to avoid any legal issues. So the moment they receive a order or a call from the police and the authorities, they are taking down content. And this is not the due process. As per the due process, there have to be legal orders that are issued. But see, unfortunately, in the public domain, we don't have access to these orders because they are classified. Orders coming from Ministry of Electronics and IT, Ministry of Information Broadcasting, or security agencies, police. These are classified orders. But if the legal orders are coming in, then the content is being taken down. That is still fine. That is how the process should be followed. But today, companies have this fear mindset. They fear that safe harbor would be taken away and they will be liable for criminal action. So, the moment they receive even an informal word or a call from the police and the authorities, they are taking down content and blocking them without even giving proper notice. See, under the specified rules of the due process, which was recognized by the Supreme Court as well, when the Ministry of Electronics and IT is issuing these takedown requests, there has to be a review committee which can take a look at these orders and examine whether they were lawful, whether they were proportionate, whether the orders were reasonable. Was there a reasonable ground on which the takedown requests were issued by the authorities? This has to be reviewed through a committee. And sufficient notice also has to be given to the user so that they get a chance to defend themselves. But in many cases which are being reported on social media and as well as in newspapers, it appears that neither the notices are being given, neither enough time has been given for the users. And even the companies which are in a fear mode, right, they don't have sufficient bandwidth to keep handling these requests. So the moment they get even an informal request, they're taking down the content. And this raises a very serious concern regarding freedom of speech and how it can easily violate Article 19. Though the government might justify that such action is necessary because fake news and deep fakes pose a very serious security and social threat. See, the government is right in some ways because a lie travels faster around the world even before truth can put on its shoes. That's the reality. That's how the human psyche works. But in the battle against fake news and misinformation, if you end up crippling genuine dissent, genuine criticism, genuine opposition against the government, then you're taking away the basic right to free speech and expression. So that is the concern being flagged in this article. And based on this, please take up this mains practice question. So it's a very important topic under GS paper 2 for polity as well as for GS paper 3 under internal security. Now let's move to the next article. We have a set of small articles relevant for both prelims and mains, and then we'll move towards the prelim section. On the front page, it has been reported that the government has raised the prices of commercial LPG and the 5 kg LPG cylinders and as well as aviation turbine fuel for international carriers. Now, this is seen as a direct result of the West Asia crisis and the disruption in energy flows via the Hormuz Strait. But please note that government has been absorbing the shock and the price rise with the oil marketing companies. That's why you don't see any increase when it comes to the prices of petrol or diesel or even domestic LPG. Since these are more sensitive, they are politically very sensitive, it will trigger a big political backlash. So petrol, diesel prices and domestic LPG prices have not been touched in a big way, right? Which means the government is taking the higher cost, subsidizing it for the oil marketing companies. But on the other hand, the government is increasing the prices of commercial LPG significantly, 993 rupees per cylinder. Now see, commercial LPG is very crucial for hotel, restaurant industry, for canteens, mess, which is present across the country, on which millions of people depend, which means the cost of cooking food goes up commercially. And eventually the cost will trickle down to the consumer. See, though the consumer is being protected as the government is not increasing the prices on domestic LPG, petrol, diesel as of now, eventually the commercial rise in prices of commercial LPG will trickle down to the consumer. If you look at 5 kg LPG cylinders, these are primarily used by migrant workers, especially those who don't have a residence, a temporary or a permanent residence, those who keep moving regularly, right? So they would avail the 5 kg cylinder, and it's mainly beneficial for the working class, for the migrant workers. And the prices have increased significantly, 261 rupees per cylinder. Now, this is going to have a significant impact on the weaker sections, on the daily wage workers and the migrant population of the country. Then the rise in ATF is specific to international carriers, whereas domestic carriers are being protected as of now. But however, there are alarming reports coming from the civil aviation industry that very soon we might face a critical shortage of ATF. And this is something which could cripple civil aviation, not just in India, but across the world. There is a lot of fear that we might face a big shortage of ATF as well. But as of now, the government seems confident that we can tide over the crisis. Because, see, the signal which is coming from the government is quite positive. When it comes to excise duty on export of these commodities. Earlier, when the war began and Hormuz was blocked, the government significantly increased the excise duty to deter exports of these commodities, to ensure that domestic demand was met, to ensure that domestic production is not exported out. The duties were raised to prevent export from happening. But now the government has reduced the exports, which means the policy stance has changed, which means the government is confident that we can meet the domestic demand while continuing our exports of some of these commodities. So that sign is slightly positive, but there are serious concerns about the long term impact. Next, on page number 8, a very important development coming from Manipur. The new state government, which was formed earlier this year, has entered into the first round of dialogue with the Kuki-insurgent organizations. And this is a big step to bring some sense of normalcy to Manipur, which has been ravaged by ethnic conflict over the past couple of years. See, back in 2008, the Kuki insurgency, led by Kuki-Zo groups, such as the United People's Front or UPF, the Kuki National Organization, these were the umbrella organizations, the larger groups under which at least 24 ethnic armed organizations were operating. The Kuki-Zo community, which has been waging an insurgent war, like many other Northeast insurgent groups, consisted of at least 24 different ethnic armed organizations operating in Manipur and across the border in Myanmar. And they were under the larger banner of the Kuki National Organization and the United People's Front. Now, the government of India, along with the government of Manipur, they had entered into a tripartite suspension of operations agreement with these insurgent organizations back in 2008. Since the groups and their capability to carry out attacks had been weakened sufficiently due to security operations under the special powers of AFSPA, in 2008, these groups had basically agreed for a ceasefire, meaning the security operations will also halt. The government forces like Assam Rifles, Indian Army, and the others won't target these entities. And these groups also, for the time being, suspended the operations. And in the time being, until a final peace accord is worked out, the cadres of these insurgents, they would be lodged in suspension of operation camps, basically large facilities controlled by the security forces, where all the militants would be housed along with their weapons, so that nothing untoward will happen, or no rogue militants would break the ceasefire and go and carry out attacks. All the cadres will basically surrender the weapons which are stored in these camps, where the cadres are also supposed to reside under the guard and protection of the security forces. This is the general arrangement that works. But in 2023-2024, the then Biren Singh government, which was accused of being biased against the Kuki community and favoring the Methi population, it was taking some action against the Kuki armed groups. First, the Biren Singh government alleged that Kuki-Zo communities are involved in drug cultivation by clearing the forest land. He blamed the fresh influx of Zozomi refugees from Myanmar following the civil war in Myanmar and alleged that some of the community members were carrying out deforestation, illegally encroaching forest land, and cultivating drugs. So, as the Biren Singh government unleashed this so called fight against drugs, the government suspended this agreement. They did not renew this agreement and they ended this ceasefire with the Kuki armed groups and the security forces. So, this made the Kuki community more vulnerable because it meant that government operations might resume, that police operations might resume, which might target these outfits. And this fear element was one of the big contributing factors which aggravated the tensions between the Kukis and the Metis, eventually turning into large scale ethnic violence. But now, as things are being settled following the visit of the Prime Minister, we have renegotiated the suspension of operations agreement. Last year, right before PM Modi's visit, the suspension of operations agreement was reinstalled in place under president's rule when Manipur was under president's rule. And now the newly formed state government has started the first round of dialogue with these outfits. So this brings some promise that eventually, under the suspension of operations agreement, there might be a peace process which could be worked out with the Kuki armed organizations. Now, these Kuki outfits have also raised a concern. Their concern is in the Ukrul sector. There are clashes going on between the Naga armed groups and the Kuki armed groups. So recently, there have been many incidents of violence, targeted violence against the community members. The Kuki community is blaming the Thankul armed groups. Thankul is a reference to some of the Naga insurgent outfits like NSC and IM faction. So they have raised this issue with the state government that the government and the police, they have to protect the Kuki community from the attacks of the armed groups from the Naga side. But as I said, it's a very complex, unresolved issue dating back to several years and decades. But the restoration of suspension of operations agreement and the starting of the dialogue between the government and the armed groups is a good news, as it can pave the way for a peace process. Now, moving on, there's an article on page 9 that refers to the role of the Enforcement Directorate. The Minister of State for Finance has praised the role of the Enforcement of Directorate, also known as the Directorate of Enforcement. Now, what exactly does the ED do? So, I will list out the role and functions, but I want you to read about the history of this law enforcement agency. I want you to find out when was ED established, in which year was ED established, then under which ministry and which department does the ED function. These are two small assignments for you. Please find this out. When was ED established, which year, and it functions under which ministry and which department. Now, the role of Enforcement Directorate is essentially a law enforcement role. It's a law enforcement agency. It enforces the PMLA, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which is our primary weapon to counter money laundering. It also enforces the FEMA, the Foreign Exchange Management Act, to prevent forex violations. And it also enforces the Fugitive Economic Offenders Act to basically track down the economic offenders who have run away from the country, like Vijay Mallya, Lalit Modi, Nirav Modi, and the others, push for their extradition and confiscate their assets and proceeds of money laundering, which is there in the country. So these critical laws are implemented by the ED. Now, the PMLA aligns with the recommendations of the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, which is an intergovernmental body to counter money laundering and terror financing. So, under PMLA, the ED has some extraordinary powers. Money laundering in India is declared as a crime. So, the ED has the powers to arrest, to search, and seize any evidence, any property, any proceeds of the crime. And as per FATF recommendations, it can be confiscated by the ED and attached to the ongoing case. And in some cases, the ED can carry out arrest, search, and seizure even without a warrant, which makes it an extraordinary power. While FATF recommends that the law enforcement agency tackling money laundering should have the power to arrest, search, and seize and attach the proceeds of the crime. The assets which are seized should be attached to the ongoing case. While India has fulfilled those obligations under the PMLA, the provision to even arrest, seize, and search without a warrant is an extraordinary power which could potentially get misused. And also, under PMLA, the burden of proof works in reverse, meaning the burden of proof is on the accused. See, generally, under the principles of natural justice, when you look at the basic laws of natural jurisprudence, the accused is assumed to be innocent until proven guilty. And proving the guilt is the burden of the prosecution, which means the investigation has to bring up the evidence to prove the guilt of the accused. But under PMLA, once you're charged, it works the other way around. Basically, your guilt is presumed from the beginning, and the accused has to prove their innocence. And this again is an extraordinary power that you generally do not see in democratic countries. The ED plays a critical role in counter-terror financing as well. It works very closely with the National Investigation Agency, the NIA, the premier counter-terror law enforcement agency that implements the UAPA. The Unlawful Activities Prevention Act also contains provisions to counter terror financing. So the ED works very closely with the NIA to counter terrorist financing as well. And over the years, it has dealt with many cases of money laundering, seized more than 2 lakh crore worth of assets, which were proceeds of money laundering. But at the same time, it faces a lot of criticism as well. The accusation is that the ED is often misused by the ruling party at the center to target opposition ruled states. Just like how CBI in IT department have been misused since many decades, there is an allegation that ED is also misused to target political opponents. Because when you look at the conviction rates are pretty low. And there is this very strong accusation that ED is often misused to settle political scores, to basically carry out political intimidation and blackmail. But however, the government justifies saying that the ED plays a critical role in national security and economic security of the country. Next, on page 10, there's an important article that will help you understand the electricity sector of India, the power sector of India. See, right now during the summer months, the demand for power surges massively. Since there is a huge demand for cooling solutions, for more refrigeration, air conditioning, air coolers, fans, there is a massive surge in demand for power across the country. And India right now is facing the deadly impact of the El Nino condition, resulting in deadly heat waves across the country. There are forecasts coming in that the monsoon cycle, the upcoming monsoons could also take a hit because of the super El Nino which is getting built up. And this could mean prolonged heat wave periods lasting for several more months. Now, during the peak summer months, the power demand which surges, matching that power demand, ensuring that sufficient power is being generated, it's a Herculean task. So, as of now, much of this power is being met through coal, through our thermal power plants. According to data, the peak demand noticed recently on a regular basis is around 256 gigawatts of power. That has been the peak requirement. And majority of it is coming from thermal power. Almost 66.9% of the power demand is being met on a day-to-day basis through thermal power stations where coal is used as the primary source of fuel. But solar is also climbing the ladder very quickly. Solar accounts for nearly 21.5% of the supply. But however, the challenge with solar is that the lack of battery storage. Because see, solar power is intermittent, right? Though we have a 30% installed capacity, solar accounts for 30% of total installed power capacity today, right? But however, the production is just at around 8.9% on a day-to-day basis. on a day-to-day basis, just 8.9% around it is coming from solar energy. Because see, you can't risk the grid stability. When solar power is intermittent and we don't have proper battery solutions as of now, the power grid planners, they can't take a risk because any voltage fluctuations can result in the collapse of the entire grid. So right now, a large part of solar power generated is not even being fed into the grid because of insufficient battery storage solutions. But once the problems are fixed, once we scale up our battery solutions, solar can also start playing a bigger role, even along with wind energy. So please note that right now we have sufficient stocks of coal, around 200 million tons of coal, that can easily last up to 2.5 to 3 months, up to 83 days at least. So India has sufficient stability with regard to thermal power generation. But when you look at your climate action commitments, though we have achieved 50% installed non-fossil fuel capacity, the actual power production is still majorly coming from thermal power, because solar and wind, they continue to be unreliable, intermittent, and that's why the battery storage solutions have to be stepped up. Next, there's an article that helps you understand what are prediction markets. This is again a new topic, very important for prelims, could be important for mains as well. Many of you may not even have heard of it. So what's a prediction market? See, there are these prediction markets called poly market and kalshi, which have become globally very, very popular. Basically, this is where people are betting on sporting outcomes or political outcomes, geopolitical outcomes, economic outcomes. On everything and anything you can imagine, people are taking a bet on these platforms. And this represents a huge risk and concern. And in the United States, media organizations are entering into agreements with these prediction markets where people can take a bet on events and outcomes. See, this is being projected as a commercial deal, which can be a win-win situation for journalism and as well as for the markets. Because see, right now, traditional journalism is suffering from lack of revenue, especially because of online and social media. And entering into these deals could potentially bring some additional revenue, as they can push these betting platforms. And since they generate content, they report on news and events, and people take a bet based on the possible outcomes. It is a win-win situation for both sides, for both the prediction markets and as well as for these media organizations. In fact, Donald Trump's Truth Social is launching its own prediction market called Truth Predict. So Trump, after starting his own social media, is now entering prediction markets as well. Don't forget, the Trump family also has a crypto firm, right? Apart from all the real estate investments. So now the Trump family is entering the prediction market business as well with a new product called Truth Predict, which would work with Truth Social. Now, through these platforms, people can take bets on the results of a sporting event, political events, elections, or even a war, even geopolitical tensions. And this is where the risk of manipulation arises. See, those with insider information, those who already know what's going to happen, they might take bets, right? They might short the market and reap huge profits out of it. Recently, one such incident occurred during the Iran war. As the Iran war was going on, right, there have been reports that several officials within the US administration have made huge profits by taking the right bets on prediction markets like poly market, because they knew what decisions had been taken, what's going to happen next. And there was another incident with regard to kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro, one of the special forces operatives who was part of the operation. Since he knew what's going to happen, he took a bet on poly market and he made almost $4 lakh. So this is how insider trading and information can work. Now, it's not just about making such corrupt profits. It's also about shaping events in order to derive profits. What if policymakers, decision makers, media, journalists, they start shaping events or misreporting the news deliberately so that they can make money out of prediction markets? So it can work both ways. And today, AI tools are being deployed to provide for probability estimates. And this could result in money influencing the real world events. See, this happens in stock markets as well, but the impact was much lower. But with prediction markets enabled with AI tools, they striking deals with media outlets and government officials being involved, and a president of the most important country starting his own prediction market, right? Things are getting very, very dangerous as far as the link between money and power is concerned. So money can easily shape politics. Money can trigger wars. It can end wars. It can work anyways. And especially the rich and the powerful, they can easily manipulate through prediction markets the way they want. And that is the concern highlighted in this article. Next, Trump has announced fresh tariffs on EU auto imports. See, this goes against the trade agreement that US and EU had announced last year. In 2025, US and European Union had struck a trade deal. They had created a trade framework, which is also known as the Turnberry Agreement. So please write this down for your prelims. There might be a question, what is the Turnberry Agreement? The Turnberry Agreement refers to the US-EU trade deal. It's named after the Scottish golf courses owned by Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump owns a chain of hotels, resorts, and golf courses, and his mother is of Scottish origin. So in Scotland, the Turnberry golf courses and resorts are owned by the Trump family. So after the Turnberry golf course, this trade deal was named as the Turnberry Agreement. Now, under the trade deal, the EU was supposed to get a tariff rate of 15% for most of the imports into the US market. That is, most of the EU exports into US was supposed to be taxed at around 15%. This was the commitment which they had made. Now, please understand, this is one of the most critical trade relationships in the world. Their bilateral trade volume is $2 trillion. That's the size of their bilateral trade. And now, Trump, who's upset with the policies of European countries for not coming to the assistance of US to clear Hormuz Strait or to support Trump's war against Iran, is probably retaliating by levying fresh tariffs, and he has announced additional 25% tariffs on auto imports from the EU market. This could basically destroy the EU auto exports into the US market. And Trump also expects that such high tariffs will push the companies to set up manufacturing in the US, which is unlikely to happen because neither does US has the skills and the talent and the resources. And this policy could end up further breaking the trade relations between US and EU, which could have a cascading effect. Now, coming to the prelim section, a few small articles. Let's take a quick look. The Narcotics Control Bureau has carried out one of the largest anti-drug operations under Operation White Strike. The operation is of such a massive scale that Home Minister Amit Shah has announced the success of this operation. So the operation was mainly centered in Mumbai, where around 349 kilograms of cocaine has been seized, which is worth around 1,745 crores. It's one of the biggest drug seizures within the country. And Operation White Strike is an anti-drug operation led by the Narcotics Control Bureau. So the NCB acts as both an intelligence and law enforcement agency. It collects its own intelligence on drug cartels operating in the country and abroad as well. It focuses on the drug cartels and the networks and the smuggling routes. It enforces the NDPS Act of 1985, the Narcotic Drug and Psychotropic Substances Act. Next, page 4, the state government of Karnataka has become the first state in the country to set up a dedicated grievance redressal portal for gig workers in the country. See, gig workers and platform workers who largely work in an informal environment, they don't have any formal process through which they can file their grievances and complaints, right? So the government of Karnataka has introduced a digital portal where gig and platform workers can register their issues and complaints against these companies. So this creates a platform where the government can ensure the rights of gig and platform workers is protected while facilitating the business of these companies as well. Next, in Maharashtra, a massive infrastructure project has been inaugurated. It's been popularly referred to as the missing link. It's basically on the Mumbai Pune highway. See, the Mumbai Pune expressway that passes through the Western Ghats. It encounters very difficult terrain in the Lonavala Ghat section. And this is where the road becomes very challenging to navigate, where vehicles slow down, the traffic builds up, leading to traffic congestion and significantly increases the travel time between Mumbai and Pune. So, with this mega infrastructure project, the distance and travel time will go down significantly. And what is special about the project is that it includes a cable stayed bridge, as you can see here, and a under mountain tunnel that even goes under the Lonavala lake. And this is Asia's widest or broadest tunnel, and also one of the world's widest tunnel. It's even entered the Guinness Book of Records. So though it's a tangential topic, there are cases where UPSC has often focused on such tangential topics as well. Next, a defense related topic. The Indian Navy has essentially took the delivery of a new frigate, INS Mahendragiri. INS Mahendragiri is an advanced stealth frigate of the Nilgiri class built under Project 17A of the Indian Navy. So, what is Project 17A and what's a frigate? See, frigates are usually these very maneuverable and flexible warships. They are slightly smaller than a destroyer, but they are very maneuverable, very easy. They're quite fast moving compared to large destroyer vessels, but they are bigger than a corvette. So these frigates are primarily used for attack missions. They are generally a part of an entire fleet, usually a carrier based fleet, and they carry guided missiles on board and they are equipped with stealth features. So these are multi mission vessels that can be used for multiple missions. And under Project 17A, which is an indigenous project, Mazgaon Dock Limited and the GRSE, the two domestic warship builders in India, have built these frigates under the Nilgiri class. It includes vessels like INS Nilgiri, Himgiri, Udaygiri, and now INS Mahendragiri. And the entire design is handled by the in-house war design bureau, the warship design bureau of the Indian Navy. So it's an indigenously designed and produced warship. And these frigates, they add to the stealth features of the Navy, and they will be joining the carrier battle groups led by our aircraft carriers. Next, the UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan has been extended by 1 year. See, South Sudan is one of the youngest countries in the world. It was formed in 2011 after it split from Sudan. But since then, South Sudan is going through a brutal civil war. And to contain the conflict and to protect civilians and innocent lives, the UN has deployed a peacekeeping mission, the MISS, the UN mission in South Sudan. So these peacekeeping missions come under the direct control of the UN Security Council. The UNSC is the one which takes decisions related to UN peacekeeping operations and decides the deployment of the peacekeeping forces as well. So now the term of this peacekeeping mission was expiring this year. So the UNSC has extended the mission by 1 year. But however, they've reduced the size. The size of the troops has been reduced. Now, why is this topic even relevant for us? This topic is very, very important for us because India is one of the largest troop contributing country to the UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan. According to Ministry of External Affairs, India has around 2,400 plus troops as part of the peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, including a few women officers. And recently, they were even awarded the UN medals for their incredible role in protecting civilians and saving lives in South Sudan. Since this topic is in news from the Indian context, that's why the extension of the term of the peacekeeping mission can become important. Next, Israel's controversial death penalty law has been criticized by a UN committee. See, recently Israel has enacted a law that by default, de facto provides death punishment only to Palestinians if they are convicted of a deadly attack. Now, you might say, what's wrong with this? If someone is carrying out deadly terror attacks, awarding them death penalty might seem like justice. But you can't use a law to specifically target a community. What if a deadly terror attack is carried out by a member of a different community or a religious or ethnic group? They will not automatically get death penalty. Only for Palestinians. If you're de facto providing such punishment, right? And also given Israel's track record, global concern is being expressed about the trial process because these trials will be handled by military courts, which are known for being opaque and not being transparent. So this accounts for racial discrimination. When you make a law specifically to punish one community, whereas other communities which might commit the same crime, they don't get that punishment, right? Any such law which is designed to target a particular ethnic group or a race or a religious group will of course attract international criticism. This has been flagged by the UN Committee on Racial Discrimination. So this topic is very important for your prelims exam. See, in 1965, under the UN, a global convention was adopted, the International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. India is also a party to it. India is also a signatory to it. And it came into effect in 1969. It came into force from 1969. So this UN committee seeks to implement the provisions of the International Convention to eliminate all forms of racial discrimination. And this committee also acts as a review body. It is a monitoring body. It has monitoring powers. It is made up of a body of independent experts appointed through the UN system, and they can review whether the signatory states are complying with the provisions. Now, under the international convention, the states which are party to it, they have an obligation to share their data initially 1 year after they accede to the convention. And subsequently, every 2 years, they have to keep reporting to the UN committee regarding their laws and policies so that the committee can check whether they are racially discriminatory against any group. Apart from that, this committee can even receive complaints from other countries, complaints from individuals, and it can even take suo motu action. It has its own early warning procedure where it keeps tracking laws, rules, and policies across the world. And if any signatory country is violating them, if specific laws are being brought to target a certain community and uh, enhance racial discrimination, this UN community can issue a report and submit this to UN Security Council and the General Assembly, which can then take further action. Now, coming to the last topic for today, the Russian port of Tuapse is in news. See, both Russia and Ukraine have been targeting each other's critical infrastructure, especially energy and oil infrastructure. Ukraine has delivered major hits to the oil terminal and the port at Tuapse. So, where is it located? The location can become important for a map based question. So, please note the port of Tuapse is located in the Black Sea. It's a critical Russian port and an oil terminal that's crucial for Russian oil and gas shipments. You can see the Black Sea here. This is the Sea of Azov. You can see the Kerch Strait and the Black Sea. And this is where Tuapse is located, in this part of Russia. It's right next to Sochi. Sochi is a very famous resort town. It has hosted many international summits as well, even sporting events, diplomatic events. Then you can also see the port of Odessa, a major port for Ukraine in the Black Sea. You can see the Crimean Peninsula and Sevastopol, which Russia has annexed since 2014 and turned it into a major Russian naval base. Now, can you name other major ports that are located in Black Sea? Ukraine has a few more major ports over here, and please find them out and mention that in the comment section. And also, I want you to take a look at the Turkish Straits. The Turkish Straits are critical waterways, another major choke point like Hormuz or Malacca. You can see the Bosphorus Strait and the Dardanelles Strait over here. Bosphorus connects the Black Sea with the Sea of Marmara, and Dardanelles connects Sea of Marmara with the Aegean Sea. And shipping through both the straits is controlled by Turkey under the Montreal Accord. Turkey is the one which has the authority to control the movement of vessels through both the Turkish straits. So, on this note, I bring the analysis to an end. I hope you guys liked the session, understood all the topics, and if you did, please press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.